Hey, so we're doing two today. Sorry I'm so late in posting these. Life got away from me. All right, page 107, Sacajawea. Sacajawea, 1788 to 1812. Sacajawea, who accompanied you, Sacagawea's husband, that long, dangerous, and fatiguing route to the Pacific Ocean and back, deserved a greater reward for her attention and services on that route than we had in our power to give her at the Mandans. William Clark to Charbonneau, in letters 1:315, August 20th, 1806. Very little is known about the American heroine Sacajawea. She belonged to the Shoshone, meaning snake tribe, although her name etymology is from Hidatsa, or Minatari tribe, that kidnapped her when she was very young. Sacajawea, meaning bird, and Wea, meaning woman. Sacajawea accompanied Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on their expedition west, acting as their translator and guide. She spoke both Shoshone and Hidatsa, and her husband, Toussaint Charbonneau, also spoke French. From the journals of Lewis and Clark, we know that Sacajawea had an incredible memory, deeply loved her family, and possessed a strong constitution. She and her husband joined the famous expedition just a few months after she had given birth. When and where Sacajawea died is shrouded in mystery due to poor record keeping, and the fact that she was often not called by name in accounts that may or may not feature her. Without a doubt, she played a vital part in the success and scope of Lewis and Clark's influential journey. The following excerpt is from the article Bird Woman in the Dickinson Press newspaper, November 9th, 1907. Sorry, I'm holding my video or my phone today to the video, so sorry it's a little shaky. All right, Bird Woman. State of Wyoming places monument over remains of Sacajawea. In view of the fact that the Club Women of North Dakota are raising a fund for the purpose of erecting a monument to Sacajawea, the Bird Woman, who is the guide from this vicinity to the Pacific coast of the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1803-4, the proposal of the state of Wyoming to build a monument on her grave is a matter of interest here. At the last session of the Wyoming legislature, a bill was favorably considered providing for the erection of a monument to cost no less than $500. On the site of the burial place of Sacajawea, the Shoshone squaw who accompanied the Lewis and Clark expedition and who rendered invaluable service to the intrepid explorers. All that remains is to make certain of the exact burial place of Sacajawea. It seems to have been proven, however, that the Bird Woman is buried not far from Washakie, the present agency of the Shoshone tribe, and there are several old Indians who remember Sacajawea and have pointed out the pile of rocks that marks her last resting place. Sacajawea was not buried on a scaffold, but according to all reliable testimony that has been gathered, the faithful squaw was given a Christian burial by her husband, a French scout, and the pile of rocks over her grave kept off the coyotes and wolves that infested the plains burying ground. Monument to her memory. When the state of North Dakota honors Sacajawea, the Bird Woman will have more monuments than have ever fallen to the lot of any squaw, not excepting Pocahontas. When the Lewis and Clark exposition was suggested, the part played by Sacajawea in the overland exposition of the white men aroused keen interest among the women of the United States. It was proposed by the women of Oregon to erect some memorial to the only woman of that history-making exposition, So Miss Alice Cooper, a Denver sculptor, was commissioned to evolve a suitable monument. The young sculptor evolved a work that had been pronounced a masterpiece, and that awakens the admiration of the thousands of tourists who visit Portland. The squaw, with a papoose clinging at her back, is seen pointing at some distant object, just as the Lewis and Clark Journal describes the way in which she pointed out many a mountain pass that made travel easy for the explorers. While the memorial at the squaw's grave will not be so costly or imposing as the Portland Monument, it will at least afford an appropriate marking place for the grave of this remarkable woman. Her romantic career. Sacajawea had a most romantic experience, which appears in fragmentary chapters of the journals of Lewis and Clark. She was the wife of Charbonneau, who was picked up as a Minotari interpreter when the expedition reached that tribe. Sorry, I'm falling over my words today. Sacajawea was a Snake or Shoshone Indian. She had been captured by raiding Minotaries and had been sold as a slave to Charbonneau, who brought her up and later married her. When the expedition left the Minotaries, Charbonneau and Sacajawea were taken along. The captains were fearful at their reception at the hands of the powerful Shoshones and desired someone to act as an interpreter when the tribe was reached. Sacajawea was taken along for this purpose. She had given birth to a child while the expedition was in the Minotari stronghold, but with customary Indian hardihood, the young mother faced all the perils and hardships of the journey. Sacagawea's meeting with her own people is thus described in the journal. On setting out at 7 o'clock, Captain Clark, with Charbonneau and his wife, walked on shore, but they had not gone more than a mile before the captain saw Sacajawea, who was with her husband 100 yards ahead, begin to dance and show every mark of the most extravagant joy, turning around and pointing to several Indians whom he now saw advancing on horseback, sucking her fingers at the time to show that they were of her native tribe. We soon drew near the camp, and just as we approached, a woman made her way past the crowd to Sacajawea, and, recognizing each other, they embraced one another with the most tender affection. The meeting of the two women had in it something peculiarly touching, not only in the ardent manner in which their feelings were expressed, but from the real interest of the situation. They had been companions in childhood in the same battle with the Minotaries, and they had been taken prisoners. They had shared the same rigors of captivity until one had escaped from the Minotaries, with scarce a hope of ever seeing her friend released from the hand of her enemies. After a conference with the chief, Sacajawea was sent for as an interpreter, and the journal continues, she came into the tent and sat down and began to interpret, when in the person of Chiniwait she recognized her brother. She instantly jumped up and ran and embraced him, throwing her blanket over him and weeping profusely. The chief was himself moved, though not to the same degree. After some conversation between them, she resumed her seat and attempted to interpret for us, but her new situation seemed to overpower her, and she was frequently interrupted by her tears. After the council had finished, the unfortunate woman learned that all her family was dead, except 2 brothers, one of whom was absent, and a son of her elder sister, a small boy, who was immediately adopted by her. The journal plays the highest tribute to the Shoshones as a nation. This powerful tribe, whose friendliness Lewis and Clark especially desired, might not have been so favorably disposed toward the adventurers had it not been for the young snake woman who accompanied the expedition. But her work as an interpreter was only a small part of the service this remarkable woman rendered Lewis and Clark. Time and time again, the journals pay tribute to her wonderful memory. As a child, She had wandered over much of the wilderness, which was then unknown to the white men, and she seemed to remember every trail, every pass, and every landmark in the wild country through which the expedition traveled. More than once the party would have been halted by apparently impassable barriers, but always Sacajawea came to the rescue and pointed out some pass through which she had traveled in childhood. After the separation of the party, Sacajawea proceeded with Captain Lewis along Clark River near the Yellowstone. Here is one instance of her wonderful memory quoted from the journals. Along the roads there were also some appearances of old buffalo paths and some old heads of buffalo, and as these animals have wonderful sagacity in the choice of their routes, the coincidence of the buffalo with an Indian road was the strongest assurance that it was best. In the afternoon we passed alongside the hillside north of the creek until in the course of 6 miles we entered an extensive level plain. Here the tracks of the Indians scattered, so we could no longer recognize them, but Sacajawea recognized the plain immediately. She had traveled it often in her childhood and informed us it was the great resort of the Shoshones, who came for the purpose of gathering quamash and cows and taking beaver, and that glade track was a branch of the Wisdom River, and that on reaching the highest part of the plain one should see a gap in the mountains on the course to our canoes, and from that gap a high pound of mountain covered with snow. Struggling over dangerous mountain passes and shooting rapids in frail canoes, the party was always accompanied by Sacajawea. On the return of the expedition, Charbonneau and his wife decided to remain with the Shoshones. The interpreter was paid something like $500 for his services, but no record is made of paying Sacajawea. The squaw remained among her people to the last, on the plains watered by the Wind River in Wyoming. Here the faithful bird woman died, and it is only fitting that her grave should be marked as the state of Wyoming proposes. Thanks for being patient with me as I stumble over some of those words, because some of those I did not know. So I hope this is still helpful for you guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.